How's it going, y'all? Welcome to the Misplay for Game Podcast. As always, I'm Andrew or Elixir.
I'm Tom. Y'all know this. Even though I'm not live, it's still your same guy.
We are not live. This is a simulation. This is a pre-recorded video. If you type something in the chat right now, I won't see it. I don't read comments.
Do you have your Twitch chat open right now, Andrew? Like just off the like HUD elements and stuff?
Yeah, I got them already.
All right, cool. I'll just be right with you.
It's funny
You
because...
don't even worry about it. Go on.
Marcio said he won't read the comments, like he's not there fighting every one of you.
Oh, every single one of you. There's some guy that he was like, you take too long. Sorry, no. Fuck, what was it? He was like, you are in a rush. And it's like, yes, bitch, I'm not meant to be here for 2.5 hours. Get off my dick. Stop glazing me. You want to hear me talk that much? Like, god damn, dude. Read a book.
We record for 2 hours every Saturday. Well, every Saturday.
Yeah, so about that. Yeah, the reason we're recording is because by the time you're seeing this, Wake Up on Trent is live. Depending on what time I send this live, it's been live for a couple of hours. So, I don't know. Check the pinned comments. I might be casting Rivals or something. In fact, if you go to the Twitch, if you're at the Twitch because you're expecting us to be live with a podcast and you see us playing Rivals, yeah, that's what's happening that weekend. Yeah, July is a busy month because we got that, and we have a case tournament that has a date. I think maybe it has a date window. Tail end of July. Y'all better be there because what else are you gonna be doing? Playing Digimon events? Because lol.
I'm sure editing. Yeah, I'm sure editing Andrew's gonna have an annotation or something. But as of right now, there's like a handful of venues that are getting back to us, and everything is nearly there. But EX6 case tournament because the UK doesn't have anything else going on. So when y'all needed us most, we showed up.
Y'all saw the day of recording and noticed that that's not a Saturday. That's because, I mean, in fact, by the time this comes out, you will have seen the YouTube video that says, hey, come to our case tournament, please. We're spending a lot on it. So like people talk about the good of the community. Be the good in the UK community and show up to our event. So that way we can give you cool ass prizes. You'll have already seen the YouTube video, so I'm literally not going to spend any more time on this. But for the Spotify listeners and Apple Podcasts, if you're in the UK and you want to come see us in person and play some Digimon, check the YouTube so that way you can get more concrete information than us spitballing before we actually know exactly what's locked in. But I can tell you there's product, there's accessories, there's a whole lot. You're getting a decent amount for your entry, and y'all should show up.
We're supporting local too. Like we got a lot of artists and creators here. So if you're as big as a stan as UK Digimon as we are, come through. And thanks for listening.
I'm trying to give people a reason to like maybe practice for something for PC16/EX6 because
there's literally nothing, right? Like the next event in Europe IRL is in France in September. It's like 2 weeks before. It's like 2 weeks before EX7.
I love France Digimon. You know, like those guys, they cook over there.
What's the TO called? The Vmon V League? You guys are animals. I love it. I never got over Setcon Devas.
Yeah, like Second Devas, like the Rosemont top. That shit was
was so sick.
Magnifique, as they say in the land of the France. However, I do not want to fly to France to play Digimon. No, it's a logistical nightmare.
We're getting the Euro tunnel thing. We're gonna show up on a 30 quid train that's gonna be cheaper.
You and me.
It would be cheaper to go to France than it would be to go to London in some instances.
You and me can do that. Yeah. But Marcio, he's got a passport. He can get in the fast line. He can leave us behind.
I'm chilling. You know,
he literally has no issue.
This is what European stand.
Kind of real on the Misplay for Game podcast to that geopolitics they hit us with. Weird what happens when you're not live.
You say that like I didn't. I mean, it hasn't come out as a YouTube video yet, but those that were in that one Memgage one where I went off on trains. I should go find that clip. Yeah. Also, I'm glad people have actually started watching Lethal or Living. We appreciate you. Like, the VOD is doing well. I got a lot of messages on it. Did you know that's not the most recent Lethal or Living? There's a whole last one that came out since then, and will get edited at some point. But yeah, let's talk about some Digimon that actually matters, as opposed to a slowly getting more and more deranged game show.
Yeah, let's get it started. So I've got. This is what we do.
We're essentially covering like whatever there's left of BT16 as we know it.
The dregs of 16, and technically, like, it's a really strange one because Bandai is covering it as part of EX6, but we'll get over that later. We're gonna start with Tech Games. Tech Games ran an Ultimate Cup.
Before we actually go into the list, how do we feel as a whole about BT16?
Sleeper format.
Yeah, BT16 was the Edison we were promised, and instead it was stolen from us. Probably as a knock-on from 15. I think this format would have been so much cooler if several months ago a Numemon didn't win Japanese Nats.
Would have been fun if it was on time.
Yeah, that too. I also would have liked to play with real cardboard for most of the format. Did you know I got to play Armor for 1 week without proxies? 1.
It sucks, man.
I think it's one of those where like
the cards are great. It just the format didn't matter.
It's so I have played like prior to the format arriving in English. I had played a decent amount, like preparing for it. You know, like getting a grasp of the format, learning the deck, sort of like
getting ready for all the events we were gonna have.
Yeah, for sure. But basically just like fine-tuning my deck ahead of time because like usually the way that I go about things is like I'll start with a deck that I want to play and then I'll like do my homework and then I'll test it, and usually my theory on the deck just like kind of bounces. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, this card's amazing, and sometimes I'll be like, this card is doo-doo dog water, whatever. So for me personally, that journey or like that process didn't change too much. However, not playing a lot of the format kind of hurt it a bit. Like obviously no delays, no events, and then like for me it's like, yeah, Numemon sucks to play against. Like I had a favorable matchup into it, but like for the average deck, like they can't really compete with Numemon. And you look at the results and it's a clear, like if somebody says that it wasn't a tier 0 format, I mean that's partially correct, but it was clearly the best deck in the format. Like if you were playing at a competitive event, you should be preparing for Numemon, but I think we saw like a few other decks like succeed. Like there were a few weeks where it looked really bleak. Like it was like, oh, okay, maybe this format is like bad, and then people like, different people playing at different events. Everybody, the people that worked on like specific. We saw like Imperial win. That was cool. Like everybody was like, Imperial 1.5, decent deck, probably won't do as well as people want it to do, but popular deck, and they won an event.
Which is crazy because like looking at Eastern data, we were expecting Imperial to win something because like we talked about like the triangle, and it was like blue Magnamon, yellow Magnamon, and Imperial, and then in Japan it was Nume was like the fourth, like, whoa, what's it gonna do? Well, and all that happened was that we switched Blue Armor and Nume, and now like Blue Armor's like, well, Imperial became the, ooh, what's it gonna do? I'm like, yeah, it's gonna win something. It's supposed to.
It's really weird because like you said, like there was a triangle, but the thing that gate kept Numemon in 16 was bugs in Japan, because in a best of 1 format you only have to stop the bullshit once. But it does, like Numemon is an aggro deck that benefited from a best of 3, which is kind of weird and like on paper. But it's because it needed to, it was less vulnerable to just getting like no sold on something. Like you were less, Numemon was better in a best of 3 against Davis than it was in Japan in 15 for the same reason. It was like in a best of 1 format over there, a single Fanglong takes your tournament. But like here, it's like, oh, they might not find it in game 2.
Also, back armor as well. Like that's 3 turn 2s that could not be raw Patamon push up and whip. Like there's more instances. Like that deck still did well. It's still top where it's supposed to, but it wasn't like 70% of your top 16 pie chart is rapid armor.
It could also be that like. Okay. Sorry, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I will say the like numbers thing that I have done when I've been collecting all the information for each week for the show is that if you look at the format, it's Marcio's right. Like it is, strictly speaking, it is probably the closest we've been to genuine tier 0 since Beelzemon, like his like first month. That was pretty crazy.
As well too.
BWG probably, that's a good comparison. What I will say is a like sincerely like 85% of the format, every event you watch at, like 85% of the time lines up with this. It is Numemon and blue, because blue just happens to be the best consistent color at dealing with Numemon. So it's Numemon Mirage, it's Numemon Imperial, it's Numemon Armor, it's some nightmare concoction where it's like Numemon and blue options in control decks. It's Numemon in like the occasional splash of like, oh, here's, God for kid, but like there's like people talking about fish in EX6, right? Like the format is what blue decks respond to Numemon. So in that sense, that has been the like prevailing thing.
And I think it comes down to sort of like a rock, paper, scissors mentality but sort of like a rock, paper, scissors approach that we're currently going through. But instead of it being a triangle, it's very much like a straight line of like, okay, Nume is rock. The format revolves around Nume. What are the things that counter Nume? Yellow and blue. So then that's essentially your paper. So there are a few scissor decks that got to shine this format. And those decks were the decks that targeted Nume.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I think Phoenixmon is a good example. Like Phoenixmon is a deck that saw some success. Like when I say some, it saw,
We're gonna talk about two today because there were two this week of this previous weekend.
It was a deck that it was very under the radar, except for the people that were aware of its existence. Like unless you were like a Phoenixmon Coper, most people just ignored the deck. It was, well, it's not one of the DNA decks, it's not bugs, it's not, what else were like the other main things?
It was also really hurt by like being lumped in with Goldramon X, you know what I mean? Like it's not, the bird support was on a different level than the other X antibody support in 16. And people just sort of put them all, like, shout outs to the homie, DigiPanda did his set reviews in chunks. And he kind of talked about like all the X antibody support was just in one video. It's like there's Sayako X and Goldra X and also Phoenix X. It's notable, I guess. And that was it. Like if that was your perception of the set, like it's a reasonable way to categorize it all. But like those cards were not created equally. Phoenix X is a house.
Yeah, Phoenix X, I say this time and time again, and I think I even have a deck profile coming out, like maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I've recorded it, I'm just finalizing it, where in an EX6 environment, like I won a tournament with Phoenixmon. And Phoenix X is a super rare disguised as a rare. Like that card single-handedly, well, maybe not single-handedly, in combination with Garuda X, but those were the final pieces of support that the deck got to like really like, okay, here's like the culmination of 4 waves of support. This is like the deck's peak. Like this is like the deck at like full strength. Like when you combine everything that we have and you make something of this pile, the bird pile. It's pretty much like with Nume. Something is going to tip over, right? And that's basically birds.
Yeah. Shout out to Just the Games for holding that, and shout out to the Fanboy crew showing up and taking 7 of the top 8 slots.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet.
W.
I do think it's funny. I said I want to amend something because I did talk a little shit at the start here. This is the format itself. I think was a letdown, irrespective of the actual way that the meta game shifted. It's mostly because of the logistics that I feel like kind of made the thing not work out. Like if this was the ban list set, I think it might have been more like, whoa, look at all the crazy new decks. But the system that really kicked up for me here was, dude, I love Evo Cups.
They're amazing.
Such a great addition. Like I can't believe, we've been watching Japanese results for forever. If you kept up with the show for a while, we check in every now and then. There's certain towns that have banger Evo Cups. Like the Brunei scene just goes crazy, right? Like you check in on them. So when we finally got something like that, I was like, awesome, can't wait, really excited. I'm hoping store regionals pick up a little bit more, and then maybe that makes its way over eventually. But I just think having that, we've always talked about how great would a middle tier event be. Middle tier events turned out are great. So
they're good for they're good for sort of getting you to start playing more competitive Digimon. I think the transition for competitive Digimon is sort of not supernatural because there's not a ton of mid-tier events. It's either okay, you start playing with your friends at someone's fucking kitchen table, you go to locals, and then the next thing is here's the big events, right? And granted, they're not going to be the most populated events, but there's still the top tier events. There's no sort of thing that you can play that is about a quarter of the population. Where it's okay, I'm playing it with a bit more competitive intent. there's less stakes on the line.
Yeah,
there's more
but you
of these
still
events
have a
for me
reason
like,
to want to top. Besides, oh, you get an extra promo pack or something at the end
Yeah.
of your run.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's being part of a structured skeleton is nice because like in the past we've had store champs, but those are kind of designated to like approximately around set releases. There's about 3 of them a year. Like they're not. This is a different beast because like Marcy said, like this is the step up from like your locals experience.
I still think they spiritually are the same. Like, it'll be curious to see how frequent we get the rotations. I know they've already said we're getting a new wave of Evo Cups, so like, hey, your armor things are actually going to matter. But like, I'm just curious to see how often they'll be.
I think the most important thing about Evo Cups is that if they're like frequent-ish enough in an area, it sort of gives you a reason to keep working on a deck to eventually land on a list for you to take to a regional. That's basically like if you look at something like Yu-Gi-Oh, you have your locals, you have your regionals, the events that are like these tend to be around like about 100 players, give or take, assuming that we're like in the UK. Obviously some areas like the US, they have like 500-man regionals, which are like their mid-tier events. But the idea is that like you grind these regionals to like, either play for world points or like work on your list, like get your name out there, and eventually you build up to that YCS, which for us right now, those YCSs are the regionals, like the country regionals that every country gets one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Evo Cups are great.
I'm gonna miss them. Hope they bring them back later in the year. That'd be great. Now that they are over.
I think they have confirmed we're getting another set of them.
We know Japan's getting their next one soon as well, so I presume that as part of the unification, this one and ours will probably arrive approximately at the same time, wrap up at the same time, and then my money is on like there is a chance there's one last set of them before the unification, but like based on this one running 2 months and then a gap, I think our next one will probably be about a 2-month gap. We'll probably pick it up in, I would guess, September around the release of EX7. And then September through November will be the block, skip the break, and then we're all caught up in February. Just my 2 cents.
Before we start actually looking at the list, I think like finally when you start looking at all the pie charts for BT16, I think you'll find that like, was Magna X a big of a problem as people are making it out to be? And I want to say no, because, a lot of decks leveraged Magna X to success, and you have decks that, were much more dominant, like Numemon, that really did not use it. But if you look at the format, I think it's sort of like this kind of format appeals more to me, where there's like a dominant deck, there's sort of like a skeleton or like a core that other decks sort of like revolve around. And then you're basically allowed to sort of like, okay, these are like the rogue picks. And, we clearly got like, okay, this is like the tier 1 decks, this is like the tier 2 decks, and this is like the rogue decks. I feel like if you look at all the pie charts, you can definitely tell that this was like a very like structured format, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it was built in tiers. But... No, I agree with that. I think it also makes it more interesting from a like analysis perspective of like trends. Like, you expect your top 2, top 3 dogs, and then you're like, where does the format fill out? And like, like these are the formats that produce the regional perceptions. So it's like, Crossheart for LATAM is like, it's a joke we do, but like it's real. Like it comes from somewhere, and like it comes from formats where it was like, why did Crossheart pop off so hard in BT11? Why did it not look like everybody else's BT11? How did it beat Black War Greymon? It's like, because that's the regional flavor of LATAM. That's what they were at. That's where the players were. That's where they lent.
Bloomlord as well. Like Bloomlord.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. So when you get formats like the one we've just had, it's like this lets you kind of see the perspective of like different regions have different skews.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like super important what you said, because there's some context for some of the TAC regionals. I remember like if you look at TAC or Oceania, their Numemon population is a lot smaller than other regions. And that's usually because for a while they were like the way that they go about getting cards, they don't have like as much availability. Like people can still get their cards, but there's sort of like less competition. So people are like, if somebody causes a buyout in Oceania, you'll probably feel it. And I believe something similar to that happened. I remember reading about it where like one guy was just hoarding Monze X, RB1 Monze Mons. So like the average player, it was either like, oh, I'm just, contributing to this guy's like fund for for the rest of Digimon or whatever, or I just play something else. The final thing that I want to talk about is basically like we learned about the unification of the game before like we got BT16. So part of me is like, did that sort of like affect results? Because fuck, I had a really good point and then I forgot.
If it comes back to you, that's a real interesting like discussion.
And,
so I'm super down to go on
buying
that.
cards that are future proof of future sets, or are they looking at short term results like you would kind of expect to see for some formats? Because like some decks are one and dones. Nume was expected to be a one and done, two and done.
And some decks tend to be like more. I think
that's also super real though. Like that's happened before in Digimon.
Armor Vaccine's
like,
a fantastic example as well.
BT10 Bloom did nothing in Japan and did way more here because people knew what it was getting, and so the Bloom players were getting reps in early. Like that you can kind of artificially.
Numemon is another example.
Exactly.
BT15, BT15 Numemon existed towards like the very few last events when it was like, okay, Pockley format is coming to an end. Somebody shows up with Numemon and cooks a Pockley, and then we're like, okay, unification of the game, we're getting the ban list ahead of time, we don't have to deal with the Pockley. That's basically where I was going. Also, people perceive, because, for example, in the US, they didn't get any product delay, so they got to play 16 for a bit longer compared to us. And for some people, it's like, oh, maybe the format wasn't that bad, and that could be because they were playing sort of like the new fresh decks from the set. Whereas some people were like, bro, for me, my buy list, I'm a Nume player, I'm getting like some Valks, and I'll go dig for someone's bulk and I'll go get some Enamons, right? And like, sure, I'll spend $10 on Ukomon. And like my tier 1 deck just gets better. But that's basically everything that I wanted to talk about before we actually start looking at the list.
That's a great point. Speaking of not getting anything too exciting and playing not new fresh decks, maybe nowhere is that more true than of what we'll be covering today than here in OCE. As always, thank you to Tech Games for being usually pretty quick about posting their results. I don't have any contact with Tech Games, but I do think it's really dope that the Australian scene is like so much more bumping than almost anywhere else proportional to their player size. The stuff is usually on Discord or on Twitter relatively quickly. So big fan of them as always.
They have like
they're well liked in the region as well. So
they have like
love a good team.
They have like a few like maybe not like teams, but like I know they have like some dedicated like more dedicated players. I know that they also they have like a couple like people that contribute to like making TAC like more like seen. For example, I know like there's like I think there's like a Terriermon guy. I can't remember his name. Yes, that's the guy.
And and then when Machine is good, you get the what they call the Sydney guys. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Alexander Chambers, I think.
Yeah.
And
so there's
And then I believe like the Lilith Loop player, he goes by Rusty.
Rusty,
online.
Yeah, he's a legend.
Yeah.
But yeah,
like got a lot of player.
Got a lot of rep here.
But yeah, let's get to
Loop will be here. We're gonna talk about Loop. So let's go over a quick like review of the numbers. Mirage most popular, like we kind of talked about Numemon and Blue. Here it is again, Numemon and Blue. Numemon and Blue actually encompassing 10 of the top 16. So it's an interesting little puddle. And then if you add in the vaccine, it's 12. So it's a weird change.
Crazy?
Yep.
I think like Mirage as a deck kinda is, I want to say, worse into things that are not like Nume Magna X, like that kind of folds a bit into those other.
Oh yeah, doesn't it still hate its Terriermon matchup? Like they just make rapid and then they make level 5 rapid and then your OTK is over.
Yeah, somewhat. That kind of sucks. Like particularly like fast red decks also tend to do pretty well into Mirage. Stack decks like Machine tend to kind of like deny it a little bit. Sometimes, now with the unblockable Mirage, it's a bit more favorable.
This is an almost reasonable number of eggs at 3 and 1.
Yeah, so this is the Mirage list, and like Mirage here, basically the Mirage players, all they had to do was like, okay, we're gonna swap out level 5, and we automatically have a good Magna X matchup.
It's an interesting one. You hear a lot about like what a ban list hypothetically looks like, and everyone's had their take on it. We've had our takes on the show, but God, I hope it's not the BT11 level 6, and it is instead something that maybe turns off this degenerate, stupid blue OTK bullshit.
Also, notice how like in favor of the new Gao, like the new Galgamon, the level 4, most people are just opting to get rid of the one that free plays Thomas, which is kind of crazy to me because I think that card still has a lot of value.
Yeah.
But the results speak for themselves. Like the jamming Galmon's a house, and a lot of the times you're preemptively playing your Thomases out anyway. It's mostly for like superior combos where you have one Thomas and you're basically like looping it in a way. But yeah,
I also think there's a lot to be said about like the strength of the new Galgamon in Archetype is that it is it is the most you can draw going into just level 4, so that you have the highest odds of a Blast Evolve. So it makes a Mirage fighting in the mid game much scarier because they're on average drawing an extra card a turn now that the Galgamon. So there's a lot of power in this level 4. There's a reason it sees play in both its archetypes.
Yeah, the climb is great because like typically like they now actively want to swing at 5. Like before, it wasn't super common for them to want to swing at 5, but now like swinging at 5 is something that they do. And also like the new Galgamon is just it's in archetype jamming.
Yeah, they couldn't ask for anything better. There is one particular thing I want to talk about in this list. This is the 4th place one. Full Moon Meteor Impact being the choice of hard removal. It's kind of returned to some of the older form for this archetype, and then 4/3 for training boost is kind of a ratio change. I think there was a pretty good consensus in 15 on that 3/3 split, and then you get to play a little bit more like, there were points of variance where I saw like Emperors and Mirages on occasion just to stop the other guy before you OTK. So there's a lot of things where it's like the deck is just at a certain point the good blue generics with a small archetype package on the top end.
It's also like they don't have to change much because a deck like Mirage, it's basically like, okay, my core is strong enough, my techs are varied, but a card that I was already playing, Impact, well, Full Moon, maybe Impact, that card, just helps them into a Magna X. That was a card that they were already playing, and they don't have to change anything to change that matchup. The one thing that they do change is obviously the level 5, but in terms of security bombs, like they just don't change that. And they already had a favorable Nume matchup, so this is like the kind of deck, it's like, I'm good into exactly meta, and if you're playing Mirage, your goal is to win like the first few rounds to guarantee that you play against meta. Because if you lose the first couple of rounds, you are in the trenches. You're gonna fight against everything that the deck hates to fight against. Like,
get ready for Shakuman, buddy.
Yeah, it's really interesting that they're like the switch to the Beast Spirits to be 6k, so you can play under Ruin mode is also pretty
makes a lot of sense. It's also extra cycle. Like, and you can give it jamming. You just put it on top of the Galgamon, and your level 4 now has jamming if in a pinch. You need that.
Yeah. If you, like us, are sick of this deck, the stats suggest that EX6 is kind of its falling off point. Yeah. It has an absolutely terrible Mastemon matchup, like a sincerely awful Mastemon matchup. And Blast DNA as a whole has some pretty damning consequences for a deck that can go wide enough to beat it. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel if you're done with that stupid level 7.
Mirage also like typically does not favorable into purple. Like purple decks tend to sort of be like one of the deck's like main walls, things that play bombs in security. Like the deck can add one of your security to your hand, but purple decks typically run a lot of security bombs or have access to security bombs. And like Demon Lords is going to be a deck that kind of somewhat keeps it in check. It can contest a lot of its early plays. It has ways to sort of like interact with it, and it just has a win con that the deck can't really stop. So
it's yeah, we've arrived at the critical mass of the archetype.
Yeah, BT16 Mirage is like, okay, you're probably going to stop seeing Mirage. But I think there's people that are going to force it anyway because it is like a sturdy tournament deck. That's enough about a deck that we've talked about for a while.
Congrats to TommyNT on the Mirage result. Very good. Good job. What are we going over next? Is this first place Numemon?
This is
first. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I got the event. I closed the tab, my bad.
Yeah, it's first place Nume. It looks pretty standard. This is a for fun list. Yeah, the Chaosmon is cool.
It's for fun. Like I get it, but it is a for fun card. I think if you add the Chaosmon, you're probably making your deck worse.
Not worse enough, apparently. First place is pretty unmistakable.
I mean,
I was under the impression it had a somewhat viable niche for the mirror as well, right? Like you can Digivolve 3 of them on ZX and start setting up because that puts them back on the regular Nume.
But if you're taking for the mirror, you should just be playing like multiple. Like you should be playing Digimon Emperors, like multiples for the mirror.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Right? It's like why play? I mean, sure, it's a 15k in security, You're
The
slightly
Satskis are higher here than I've seen a lot of the time as well. This is like 2 to 2 is a different kind of ratio than some of the other ones I've seen. So
Yeah.
And Numemon is like the polar opposite of a deck like Mirage, where like this deck just probably gets better in EX6. Like
yeah, it stands to reason that it'll do. Numemon does eventually hit a problem where it's like Blast DNA can really hurt it, and like strong counter timing effects disproportionately hurt a deck that is mostly boards that are level 5. But like eventually, well, we've talked about this on the other episodes of the show. Like Numemon's big problem in current format in JP is how do you out a 15k unaffected blocker, and you can't is the answer.
They just basically have to like trap you into
Until Shadow Cosma, D Reaper is like a more understood concept for the format. That's where Numemon currently sits. But yeah, congratulations to Li Tao Chen. Great work winning your I think your first OCE regional, which is cool. I didn't recognize the name.
Talking about Vmon armor here, I think like if you scroll down to the text, like this list is a bit more tech for Nume. 2 Death X is a bit more on the higher side, and we see like the 1 Shu, 1 Davis.
Love the Shu Yulin, man. It's so
sick.
You hide the Tamer cards to play around Death X in the mirror. You can save it from Tamer hate.
I've played like Magna at like 1 local, and just to kind of like, just to sort of like acknowledge, sort of confirm it to myself that like, yes, this is a tier 1 deck. And I think this is a deck that is like, a lot of people like Magna, right? Like, it's, the deck's ceiling isn't particularly high. Like, this is like, you pick up the deck, you kind of very quickly get the idea of what you're supposed to do, and a lot of your cards are like best in slot, and you do have some freedom with your text. I think like, people are trying to Shu the Davis, the Zubagon. In my personal opinion, like, Magnalist should be playing like minimum 2 to 3 Lightning Rays, but that's just me. Awakening is like another amazing
Awakening's kind of low in this list. It turned out not to matter on the day, but I was kind of surprised.
I think it's because their armors are all named Magnamon, so in a pinch you are just gonna pay the 5. If you're on a mem setter, first action is make the big bunkers.
And also notice the shift that Magna sort of went to, which is that we're playing boosts over trainings because you're sorcerer now. Now you're casting spells with your Magna X. You're like Zubagon and Awakening and Heavens, but you're already casting Heavens.
Anyway. Yeah, but even
the other thing is like when. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say just the Awakening can be a lower count because a boost is effectively an Awakening like under a mem setter. Like you're pushing up, you boost, you go to 5, you evolve, you can keep turn with your Magna, so you don't have to see Awakening to like keep turn on a memory setter with no investment.
But if you see both, it's kind of broken.
Yeah. And I think the thing that changed with Magnamon specifically in this set over previous versions of armor is that it went from the best blue good stuff underneath. Or sorry, once you made your armor core, it was the blue stuff on top. Now the armor is the top end, and you substitute that with tools. So it's like Marcio said, you are using the option cards offensively. You're using the memory to pay for them. But also, like in a world where you would run trainings are only the most useful when you're necessarily digging for the tamer cards and options. And other than Mem Boost, there are no searchable options off a blue training. And you're paying like 2 to find Davises. This deck only evolves twice. Like it doesn't need a training.
It's also that this hasn't particularly changed. Like Vmon armor is still a deck that wants to have a Vmon in the back and then like trigger its powerful Windage Evolving level 4s, particularly like the Black Magna and the Unsuspend Magna, because you want to get the most bang for your buck for your cards. And as a result, this is like it somewhat loses to Ruin mode. Like Hall Stack Ruin mode can be problematic. But the other thing is that I don't think enough Magna players are like attacking for themselves, because if you are a Magna player and you're like, okay, I'm going to play the mirror like a handful of times, in my head, or like the way that I've approached the deck is to attack for the mirror and play slightly higher counts of Zudos. When I say slightly higher, I think like 3 is like a good number for me. But then more Zudos tends to lose to sort of like taunt-esque effects, which there's a lot of taunt in the format. And so that's not something that you don't want to turn skip yourself, especially if you're caught lacking without like memory. Like if if the only guy you have out on the board is a Magna and you then evo into Zudo, you turn all of your Davises off. Yeah. So next turn, you're just denying yourself memory. but it's a deck that, it saw results. I don't think it was as big of a deal as people thought it was going to be. And that could be partly because like Nume is just much more broken, right?
Yeah, there's also something to be said for the fact that if you once again look at the conversion data on the individual cards, like there really is no getting around what the Ukomons are doing.
There is an easier version of the deck that does require significantly less investment.
Well, investment. What way would you describe investment?
I would say that like, as much as like, you can still make turn 2 Magna X on the blue build. Like the yellow build just ramps in ways that do not seem intended by game developer. Like
Patamon plus Emissary to make a cost 1 in total Magna X.
Yeah.
Or sorry, a Rapid X.
Yeah. The other thing about like Rapid or Yellow Vaccine rather is that it is sort of like the Hyrule version of Vmon armor. Like you're playing the deck with the intent of opening up something along the lines of like Patamon TK Rapidmon, right? And then you're just gonna high roll your way into making like the most power. Like this is one of the most powerful tempo decks.
It's crazy they're on multiple shoes. Like that used to be like blue armor's thing, and yellow players are like, you know what? I don't like going to time anymore. I will just kill them too.
But the deck has a bit more ceiling because you do have to manage like your security. You need to know how to play out of bad situations. Like you're not going to open that Patamon every time, and you're going to hate to evolve for 4, but you're going to have to evolve for 4.
And they really only make Magna off the Awakening. Otherwise, they are paying 5 and not over.
But they do have the memory. They do have the memory, right? Like a Patamon and a couple of TKs is enough to solve world hunger. Like memory is not something that they start for. Also, you have a bit more toolboxing. You have the Rapid X, you have the Venus, you have a pretty powerful ace with Magna Angemon. Even like Anju, I think, is like a card that is worth playing. Yeah. This list is not playing it, but I know people that are playing Anju.
I think recovery, also allowing this deck to draw a little more slowly but still efficiently, is a big tool for it here. Like when your resource pool, what was it was 4 TKs, 1 Davis, and 1 the previous Magna X list was 4 Promo Davis, 1 Davis, 1 Shu Yulin. This is 8 Tamers instead of 6, and it is like so much more incentivized to just like put one in security. When you don't have to draw into some of these things, it makes a big deal.
Especially the Digimon Emperor in a list that is heavily abusing Shrink is going to be a very generic draw engine that like you don't need that yellow TK to peek into security because you're probably going to draw the cards you need eventually. If they were in there, you're going to slowly chip away at them with like your TKs and stuff like that. So I can see why they're not burning them, because they're just like, they want those resources there as a way to refresh their Magna X as many times as possible.
You also have a way to like deal with like turn 1 Nume bars. Like if you go first as a Yellow Vac player, you have a lot of agency in the matchup, assuming that your Patamon hits. Like, and ironically, if you open Patamon TK turn 1 against Nume, you feel great because you can immediately start controlling what the Nume player is about to do, and then you somewhat like invert the matchup on its head. Whereas like with a Vmon player, realistically, the only way you're actually dealing with their first like body out on the board is with the
Magna Security.
No, the Black Magnamon on Evo, right?
Oh, that helps too.
Yeah, you go Vmon, Promo Davis, Vmon, and then hope that they slam something to board to search instead of playing 2 trainings.
And then at that point, it's like a different. Whereas like here, all of your armor is just 5 for board immediately. And you have the toolbox helps, and you also have the ability to go into Venus to stop something like Mirage. But this deck does require more secret rares. It does require more super rares.
Mirage and Magna, because it is turning off a when digivolving, so Magna's not going to gain its protection in the mirror, so you do like extensively do better in the head-to-head, which I think is pretty important.
The Venus,
The Venus, it's like this deck is just to simplify the argument. This deck is just more expensive. Like you need the Ruin, the Death X, the armors. You need the Magnagemons, the Patamons. Like you're paying a premium, which is sometimes out of Hyrule.
Yeah.
I think it's funny. It also suggests something that like if this is the permutation where this is the least invested by needing Ukomons, I think it's a funny way for Yellow to have gone. So we'll see how EX6 changes the Yellow Vaccine. I suspect that you're going to be seeing a lot more of Patamon turning into Rapidmon and a lot less of Patamon turning into Angemon. But that's how the format goes.
Yeah.
I live in Domini.
We got to talk about the elephant in the room, though, Andrew.
Yes, sir.
The Balsamon in the room.
Yeah.
You successfully did it. I don't want to, Ethan Liu might have had an independent testing group where they arrived at the same conclusion, and I don't believe this is Balfi's 50.
No,
it
Dark Master ratio is slightly different. Balfi was cutting the Puppetmon down to, well, Balfi was I think he was 222, but if he said that he was going to cut one, he would cut the puppet to go more on a metal Seizuramon or a machine, and they've interestingly gone for one machine and then 2-2. And there's no Piedmon at all. They've actually just...
there's two Piedmon.
It's just purple.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Digital Gate sorts it by release.
And this is like, whether or not... I mean, I would love to know if they were inspired by Balfi's, success with Belphapocli. And, they were like, oh, that was cool. I'm going to test it. And it's like, oh, wow, this is actually kind of cooking, right? Like, this is actually putting in work.
Apocally saw, but behind the thing about Apocalymon is that it's wild for a number of reasons. The card's probably never ever coming back like some of the other things shouldn't. But the thing about Apocalymon that's crazy is that it's not just a Dark Master's boss monster. It's like a generic level 7 for these colors. So it was supposed to be like a black and purple equivalent in terms of impact to what Red and Blue had been doing with Blitz Omni the whole time. And Belphemon did see a resurgence because it was more resilient against pure Apocaly in some cases and could play Apocaly against the decks that you needed to. So it was not an entirely untested concept. It was just why would you ever, if you owned Apocalymons, why were you not milling? But here is why.
So in this list, if you look at it, it's kind of an evolution of Balfi's list. I think this list, if you scroll down, it's playing Digimon Emperor, which is something that I believe Balfi wasn't playing, and that is to counter the aggressive strategies. So essentially,
was he not on it? I thought he was on one.
No, because he was playing. I think he was playing Calling, and he was playing more of the pieces and more of the Apocalypse pieces.
He wasn't on Calling, but I know who. I think he was on 3 Lament, which is something that not everyone is. I think a lot of people.
I think he was on 2, but he was playing 4 Karada. He was playing 2 of the Dark Masters.
Mm-hmm.
He was playing, I think, 4 XTs.
Balfi, he was also on 4 Astamons.
Yeah, 4 Astamons. Balfi's list leaned in more on his engine.
Belphemon first.
Yeah, it was the Belphemon to make everything tick. Whereas this guy was I'll probably get there. I need myself some Digimon Emperors to stop these goddamn Ukomon decks. Except I'm also a goddamn Ukomon deck.
Yeah, and then XT Emperor really does do a lot to slow down those decks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, make a blocker and then make an unaffected thing. And you can slow the game down to enough where you can just hit them with a rookie 4 times. We saw, not nearly as successful. We saw James running it at the Ultimate Cup where there's a board where he just had 4 bodies on board, and there is a world in which that is just 4 checks. Hope you find something in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like the aggro pile. These first 4 cards just facilitate so much aggro, especially because Ukomon, there are so many times back before it was 8 Ukomons in Belfer where it's okay, am I blowing up the egg and getting my 1-cost proto, or am I evolving one of my very few real rookies and giving up on a 1-cost proto for the rest of it? Whereas Ukomon's just you get best of both. You get to accelerate an egg and then pop one in the same turn. And that is
they don't mind having turn if they made the 1-cost tempo cheat.
I think so. The thing I want to talk about is that I think it's funny for exactly Tom, which is that people are looping around to the idea that Apocaly is maybe cool, and it's we can validate playing Apocaly because everything else is cringe. So it's okay that I'm playing Apocaly.
We're gonna talk about it longer here, guys, because we gassed up Phoenixmon at the start of this recording, but you know what deck had the exact same proportion of representation in Top Cut last weekend? That was Setcon. So
you could never make Setcon cool.
I know, and so if you need a cut in iron to do it deck, you gotta play Mill. Mill exists to punish greedy control decks, and there's no I've played a lot of card games over the years. Setcon is a primo example of just a do nothing, get endless value control deck. It's all greed. So something like that is a cool adaptation that people are oh my god, they have printed generic Mill options. Awesome. Finally, interesting design.
But it's the same thing. All of you mill players, you guys think you're Batman, but you're actually Rorschach. It's the rock paper scissors thing where it's like, okay, it's like every second player's brain operates on the idea of like, Digimon is so boring. All they do is evolve into their Greymon and swing for 5 checks. I'm going to play a deck with options in security to sometimes I've heard the argument that like, I play second because I want my opponent to think, and it's like, no, you don't. You just
you play second because it's low APM, really easy to coast through your first 3 rounds.
Yeah,
you wake up for lunch break and then you clutch up for your regional run.
Exactly, and then there's like the people that are like, silly second players. Wouldn't it be a shame if I, Mr. Gallantmon player or Mr. Mill player, just like ruin your run? I'm cleaning up the streets.
I get up in the morning to burn 3 to 4 security a game.
Exactly.
I just today, it's on my desk. Today finished my Galactimon alt art collection so I can burn security in a new color.
And it's like,
get up in the morning to hate, fellas. Don't ever forget it.
And this is maybe why you don't have, the tournament success that
it's true. If I could finally break my top 32 curse again, that'd be great.
But that's because, right, you're setting your friends up. You might not be the LeBron James, but I don't know any more basketball players.
Scottie Pippen is right there if you picked MJ, but
Scottie Pippen has a lot of rings.
You're like the
you have a lot of bubbles.
The Rodney, the
Dennis Rodman.
Rodman, yeah. The guy that Slam Dunk is based off of, right?
Yeah, man. I'm the Dennis Rodman of Digimon.
Yeah, exactly right. You're like, Michael Jordan is that guy, but I'm gonna do my thing, okay? And you're just like ruining second day's lives like over and over again. And it's you're setting up your friends, but
shout out to Dennis Rodman. I hate the Chicago Bulls, but I hear you, man.
Anyway, all of this is said that like people are like, maybe Apocally is fine.
And then
speaking of exciting alternate win condition decks,
the Digimon equivalent,
gang.
The actual Digimon equivalent of a filibuster. That is matchup check your opponent game 1, and then suddenly, I forgot what all my cards do, bro. I just gotta read them to make sure I don't miss sequence.
I really have to think about if the Tamer floats into Arukenimon or Mummymon here. You're gonna need to give me at least 45 tournament seconds.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to give me 60 Capcom seconds. Take it or leave it.
Yeah. What are we talking about here?
Mummy Loop. Mummy Loop wins its game 1 and then slow plays you to death.
No. I don't think it's like that. I don't think it's like that. I
have never seen footage of a Mummy Loop player winning 2 games in a row that wasn't like final table stream games.
Okay, I think it's a deck that suffers from I'm doing nothing until I'm doing a lot.
Yeah, that's true. The pop off turn where they spend 15 memory and then minus 15 you with their ruin mode is crazy.
But then the thing is that like they need very specific things to get set up to actually kill you. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times they're looping because like, that's just like, I will chip you down, but I might not OTK. Like one of the easiest ways that the deck has to win is just my Cherubimon will die and I'll spawn 4 Ukomons, or I'll spawn 7 Ukomons, or however many Tamers I have out.
Domain expansion.
Actually, domain expansion. But up until that happens, you're like, okay, Lilith, Jack Raid calling, ruin mode, Lilith, Jack Raid calling, ruin mode. Mm-hmm. And like, sometimes it could just be that the opponent is like, it wasn't the first 15k ruin mode that slowed me down. It might not be the second. I think on the third time that the third one, I might be able to play through that. And then it's just like, I now have I have 10 minutes to play out game 2, right?
I will give you that. Obviously, we're kind of doing a bit, because in the tier list, we talked about how this deck goes to time a lot. I don't think in any serious context we could pretend that a deck playing 1 Avenged Kidmon, 1 Lament of Friendship isn't trying to slow play you. That is the 2-card combo that makes you go infinite, and they play it in every control deck.
It is really interesting that they're on that instead of the 2 Gizmon AT.
No, this is exactly what I was going to talk about. I'm pretty sure that this is a more streamlined version of the deck where it focuses more...
adaptation.
Huh?
This is your Setcon adaptation. This is how you never deck out against Setcon, because you can punish their stuff, mess up their Avenged Kidmon turn, and then it just lets you set up for your million damage turn.
Exactly. Essentially, this version it gets to a point where all you're doing is drawing and trashing your options because you're playing Pummel Whack, to join to the rest of your options, then you have calling for Avenge Kid, right? Calling can pick up anything, or
no, Lament can pick up anything. Calling picks up 2 purple.
Okay, sure, right. So you Lament for free because of Lilith for your Avenge Kit, and like you're not running out of resources, and so they just took out the XT package because while it's probably very good, Avenge Kit, you know, it's also a body on board. And this is like I think you know, like the whole like, oh, I didn't it takes 2 players to cheat or whatever. This is it's like it takes 2 players to go into time. It's like if you are getting Ruin Mode looped, you should scoop to give yourself more time to win. But a lot of people won't do that because either they're experiencing the deck for the first time, or like you know, there could be any amount of reasons.
Unlike Secon that makes 1 action per turn, is like this was on you because you were playing most of the game. This is like, should I skip this cutscene? Or is there important dialogue that I'm going to regret missing?
I'll give you guys that one. In 99%, like in an XT list, I 100% agree with you. Get to game 2, you know you're getting cooked by the loop player.
Yes.
The thing that's frustrating about Lament and Avenge Kidmon, and why I think they'll probably end up being a banned pair down the line, is the specific interaction that these decks get to use by going infinite. Because the thing about Lament that's stupid in control decks is it truly can be anywhere. If it's in security, they'll get it. Eventually, if you let their game go long enough, they'll draw, or it's the 4th security card. Like there is no play. Like if your XTs are your last 2 security, you lose the game. If Avenge Kidmon Lament are your last 2 security, congratulations, we're restarting. So there's so much power in the way that those 2 cards interact with each other that's distinct to, and this is not like control decks are abusing this outside of Mummy Loop. I'm not trying to say that I do not personally believe Mummy Loop is a toxic interaction. I think
it's a lot of oversights. It's a lot of oversights, right? It's like the Ukomon package like speeds up the deck that typically a purple deck wouldn't have access to this kind of filtering.
And it's doing it in a way that's not just draw 1 crash.
Yeah, Lilith and Jackraid should not be in the game. Yeah.
Exactly. Lilith, Jackraid at Taylor's oldest time.
Exactly.
And then like
and then Ruin Mode is But like the specific thing about Lament Avenge Kid is it's the same, like, you know, we just saw an Apocalypse make top 16. So like maybe Lament and a way to recur Lament is probably not the most baller.
Also, this deck kind of has broken security. Like,
oh my god, yeah. It's Purple Black is so annoying in a format full of Ukomons, and Deathclaw, Deathslinger, Jackraid is obnoxious forever. Like
Jackraid is just like, why am I getting Hammer Sparked in purple? Yeah. It's like the card, the value of
it's where you want Jackraid first. You don't want it in your hand. You want your first 2 in security.
Because against like decks that have to swing multiple times, like for example, Greymon doesn't give a shit about Jackraid because they do all of their checks at 1, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like Mirage, they have to individually go through
Mirage.
You individually have to go through your security. So eventually, if there's a Jackraid and they've spent their memory to make sure that your hand is like filled up to the 9, you know, that could end their turn. It's probably maybe not worse than a security bomb, but it hurts just as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, this deck is like a lot of oversights, and I'm glad that like this deck got to do something. I think like Rusty is one of the few people that would be able to. Okay, when I say one of the few, I can think of like 5 to 6 players that would be able that I know, or when I say no, like that I'm aware of.
You're aware of on the scene.
One that you would trust.
Exactly, people that I'm like, okay, if somebody was going to do it, it would be this player, right? And but we've only seen 1 loop player, and this is what we were all saying before, is that like the average loop player, you know, like they weren't cooking this deck before it even the video even got published.
Yeah, most people saw Arukenimon and Mummymon, the Tamer card, and like, that's cool, Myotis. Yeah, and nobody paying attention to what it really is doing.
And
that's purple in Digimon.
This is a super streamlined version of the deck. This is no Myotis.
Just make the loop.
Make the loop, Cherubimon, fucking, you know, Ukomon, Shadow Clone Jutsu.
Yeah, for real.
But
so yeah, kudos to Will Dawson. Well done.
Is that Rusty's name?
I don't actually think this was Rusty. I'd have to check. I gotta Google some stuff.
Yeah, well, Rusty is.
I don't know Rusty's government. I'm not gonna hold you.
He's been in our comments before. So Rusty, if it is you, let us know in comments if you find this. Appreciate you, bud.
Yeah, congrats.
All right, moving on.
Also, thank you for doing your bit on getting Avenged Kid Lament restricted. There's there's two last unique archetypes in tech games. Do we want to talk about bugs really quick, Marcio? Because I know you're the guy to do. This one's fun. It looks a little bit like some of the older design lists I remember seeing.
Okay, so so this is like, I think bug players got stuck in the deck building process of the deck, and I'm not saying that that's not the reason like why the deck isn't winning, or like why the deck isn't seeing more success. Like, it's seen as many tops as I thought the deck was going to see, which is a handful of top 16s, maybe like a top 8, right?
By a wide margin, the most successful green deck of the format. Like, it has pretty heavily outpaced the Terriermons.
Yeah, and that's because like it's better than the Terriermon into things that don't have it beats Numemon. It's like it stomps the crap out of anything that's like fake. Like, Terriermon will randomly lose to like random garbage. Like, that's just the thing that happens to the deck, but this does not.
Yeah, this deck says option cards are nothing.
And like, I'm not going to take away any credit from the player that topped with the deck. Like, congrats, like, they killed it, you know, like, they made the archetype work.
11th place.
I haven't gone to any tournaments, so I can't be like, I would have done better, you know? It's like, they managed to make a list and make it work. However, in my opinion, I think that the list falls short to sort of like the things that I would want the list to do in the format. Like, you know, it's still playing the promo Kuwagamon, so a lot of people are going to look at bugs and be like, do I need this card? And the actual answer is no, you don't. Like, the card is great if we were playing Tyrant Mirrors, but we're not. So the card, in my opinion, has less value. It's playing, I do like that they're playing like 4 Lopmon and committing to the damage, and that's probably why they were able to top. They were actually able to kill people.
There's also a double Typhoon to really get the bang for your buck.
To get more bang for your buck. You know, HPD is the card that I feel a little bit on and off about it, but like Shivamon is something that I don't believe in the deck.
Where are the Emperors?
Like, no Emperors. You know, it's a lot of like, okay, these are the cards that I would think to include in Tyrant, and I'll move my ratios around, but they haven't like, for me, they haven't like taken the deck to the next step. And if I was to guess as to why they lost in tournament, it was maybe to an armor deck, because I look at this list and their armor outs are, they're gonna have a hard time.
Giant missile, and I hope there were enough Izzies, right?
And like Shivamon helps, but you know, but yeah, this looks good for bugs, but it's lacking a bit of sauce. But you know, Double Typhoon, 4 Lopmons, clearly it worked for them. This list, you know, it put in some work. Like, I don't disagree with it. I just think that it's a little bit, you know, behind in modern bug theory, at least for me. But I'm not the bug guy. Like, I don't have any accomplishments with the deck. I'm just somebody that has been playing the deck a lot. Anyway, that's basically my take on Tyrant.
It seems cool. Like, they're leaning into a piercing package by using the promo Quagamon as well, because then you've got the Quagax to give native piercing, so your line is like Lopmon on the side, Rhino, swing, get your 2 checks.
I'll let you guys in here as like while we're recording this and not while it's a live section. But one of the things when I make a section for MemGauge is I throw out so many half-baked prompt ideas. One of the ideas that I've balanced a couple times is that I tried statements like, it is clear what promos are made for what decks. It's clear what promos are made for what decks, and I feel like this Kuwagamon is a really interesting card because it organically looks like it's supposed to be for bugs, but I always shines in other but it's like it's a Leopardmon card, right? Like, that's the thing it's supposed to do, but like the meta kind of artificially gets manipulated by like Bandai's product release. So like the Kuwagamon is like a really interesting, like, how does this card get so much, like, why are people so stuck on promo 100 Kuwagamon next to Tyrant? Like, it's not doing a ton for
evolving for 2 as well is really interesting. Just being like generic Evo, none of this like reduced cost dual color bullshit where they're like,
what if it went over Kunemon for 1? Like,
this card is really, really good with Cherubies, because Leopardmon Toolbox X now can like end on a 5 or multiple 5s, like assuming that we're playing against something like Mirage, just to put Cherubi on top of it, and then Cherubi play out Kuwagamon, and all of a sudden your green deck has an out to Mirage. Like, you just stop them from unsuspending.
So if I ever figure out how to word that statement from MemGauge, it'll be there. But like, that's the sort of thing I think about with bugs, is it's like, you know, how much of I had my promos already. That makes me my bug player at locals. Like, I wonder where they come from. So
there's two sides of the coin, right? Because you have cards that are not intended for bugs that end up in the deck, but then you have cards that are bugs that you think you should be playing, but then you test it and it's like, well, you know, it's not doing it for me. I could be doing some other stuff. And Rhino Cab is a card that, like, I've liked the card a lot. I've come to like take the card out of the deck. But Andrew brought up that they were playing a piercing package, and you saw that in my version. I was also playing a piercing package, but just at level 5 to speed up my deck with the level 4s, right? Like, whereas my version was playing, like, you could say
one-cost Evos.
Yeah, like the 1-cost Evos to speed up the deck, the Digimon Emperors, the Bancho Leomon Farmers. It was a much more teched list for, okay, this is like what I'm going to be playing against. So Mirage Nume Armor, I have a card in my deck that checks all of those 3 decks. Whereas this is like, I'm going to play bugs, and I'm going to play the good cards in bugs, and I'll have a good time, and I'll win because I've practiced a lot with this list. Anyway.
You want to talk about Sylphimon? It's the last unique archetype in OCE.
So Sylphimon saw success, which
Thank God. This deck is so cool, and it has such a good Armor Magnemon matchup, and it's just like, if it had a not as awful Numemon experience, it might be better.
I can't.
Some people are on higher counts of Red and Crimson Blaze to try and
it's like
hurt Numemon.
The deck that never was, like, if we had more time with 16, I think eventually there might be more.
And I hate Hawkmon, bro. Every time I look at DNA, or like every time I look at like O2 expansions, like Hawkmon just gets the scraps. Like, these are Mastemon cards that happen to have been red. Like, it's not the other way around.
But it is doing a lot of things that most of the Sylphie players were kind of like aware it's playing the Sora Biyumon package as like a way to sort of like mimic the recursion I get from playing something like a yellow base. It's playing the armor.
Wings of Love. There's 2 Wings of Love in here. Yeah, that card is a house.
That card's really good. Playing your Tamer for 2 is just good.
Spitting out the Dual Tamer and then so you promote on 3, use the Wings of Love to spit out the Dual Tamer, and then now you've got a DNA extension is nuts.
It's very good. Like, it's playing the Magna X, which I think, like, pretty much every deck that isn't Imperial that's a DNA deck, they should be playing some copy of Magna, like some copies of Magna X. The card is too good for you to not include it in your deck. It's like, yes, it ruins the flavor of my deck, but you just win more. Like, your Magna X. It's also
got there are 8 armor forms in here, so it's like, why wouldn't you? They are like, both the colors you need.
Yeah, like you're playing the Awakening, so like your Harpymon all of a sudden turns into a Magna X, and that's like super frightening. You have the Sala, the Dino Bee. Like, this deck is clearly built with an aggressive playstyle in mind. They're even playing the old Sylphie, which
is crazy.
It has a distinct use. The inherit being when attacking Papa 5k is super important when you interact with specific boards where Magnemon needs to get round. Like, for example, like if you are already going to move at and like trigger the first security check to reapply your protection, but you need to pop the little blocker that's stopping you swinging at security to get the trigger, the Sylphimon inherit is really relevant there.
It's non-once per turn as well, so that's like in a board where the board is so wide, but you've also got some tall bodies that you need to heavens or control in some way. Being able to just like chip and then like single target something important is.
They don't print a lot of red that like red's deletion is typically not once per turn because how does it unsuspend? But if you can go into a blue level 6, why wouldn't you?
There's an argument to make that this list was maybe like a couple copies of like Edamon from seeing a bit more success. Like, it's a yellow card, so you're not losing too much value on the things that you normally would stop you from playing it.
However, this is infinitely more swag, and I think that is like OCE in a nutshell.
Sure, yeah, exactly. You said it perfectly.
Even the Wanagunimon.
Yeah, down to like the Wanagunimon. This is just a tight list.
I love. My favorite card in this whole deck is the single copy of Awakening, because it's like, God is my witness, it will be in my security, and I will cook your fraud ass.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a good list. Like, they lean into the best parts of Sylphie, patched it up with like a bird package. Interesting that they're playing the Koromon and not the Yokomon. I think that is somewhat interesting to me.
It's probably because they're only on the one Sora, and you already get your recursion from the Gatomon, so you don't need the on delete thing, whereas you can just go get your draw, my one rookie.
But then it's playing the Biyomon, which like actively wants you to like, pitch types, and then, if
I guess, but you're pitching to bring it back for the Dino Bee. Like that's what they're setting up for. Like, that is put a free type in the trash, make the second best Sylphimon and play out a free type off of it is probably how they're doing it.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's cool that like because they're on the drawing, it's kind of like Imperial where they get to use the drawing twice. Like if they're swinging at 4 with an armor, like realistically, there's no real like downside to swinging at 4. Like you're either swinging with a barrier Gato or an armor form, and so then you swing at 4, draw 1, Jawgrass, you get to draw 1 again.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, DNA re-enabling inherits is like a crazy established power to that power budget, but holy cow, it does good in this deck. This is the deck that would have been for me, this format. I think Sylphimon is so cool.
Not enough time and like...
Yeah, exactly.
So that was TAC. What's next?
Yeah, that rounds up TAC. We're not going to go over every single archetype that we've seen duplicates of. We'll probably look at first and second for the next regionals. But chronologically, the event that followed TAC games was No Heroes. Shout out to No Heroes. Big fan. We appreciate y'all and any good European DOs. Want to back on the stream.
I will say that I understand like why logistically like they didn't, because I was initially planned to cast it, and I understand that like why that that didn't go through. Like I'm not saying that like No Heroes sucks or whatever. They're like I like No Heroes. I like what they're doing. They're they put in a ton of work for the One Piece community and trying to get
Dragon Ball too, right? They work on Dragon Ball now as well.
They're trying to do some more for the Digimon community, but it's one of those where like
I'm sure their numbers will tell them that like, okay, without commentary we get this much. With a talking human, okay, yeah, we get better numbers.
We might get better numbers, and it could also just be that like this is No Heroes. They tend to sort of get assigned slots towards the end of the format, like literally the Saturday that the event was happening.
Yeah, this event dropped the day after release date for EX.
Yeah, exactly. Like why, unless you're grinding for tournaments or you're grinding for your Blitz Omni or whatever, why would you as a player want to play in an online tournament of BT16 when you can just go to your local shop, get some boxes and have fun with your buddies instead?
Yeah, 61 entrance is small.
Yeah. We'll see this more and more. Like we haven't made a huge thing about player entrance or like attendance size, but regionals online compared to Ultimate Cup online, like Ultimate Cups are like people love getting those red hybrid promos. They are not as crazy about fishing for being first place to get a serial Omni. And I think like Garcia said, like it puts a very specific. I want to be so clear. I have no judgment on the quality of the players. I think this is probably a legit slice of the 61 most competitive players in Europe.
Johnny was there.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're ready to fall, you're ready to.
This was a tournament for the real like tournament grinders.
Yeah.
This was like, oh, I'm going to play Digimon at every opportunity that I have. I'm going to be there.
Yep.
But whereas like an online tournament gets like the Raid and Trade one that you did, Andrew, had like what 100 something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like 50. Best. It's like 50 people that were like, no, I'm gonna go open EX6 instead.
Yeah.
Right.
Should we start with the first place Mirage list? Sure. This one's a bit different. It's on the Lanamon, which is a cool thing to highlight again. And then the ratios kind of returning to some stuff we saw back in like EX5 era, where like there's the blue mem boost at 2, the mental training at 4. Like it's a lot more about like I will methodically collect all of the pieces of Exodia to one-shot you blue attacking style.
I think this is like a list that's like I'm not going to commit to making my list better into Magna. Like they're playing 4 of the Gal Searcher, which I personally like. I think that card is fine. Mm-hmm. I don't get the beef. Like sure, it bought like some of your stuff. Whatever, dude.
More rookies in general in this list though, like compared to the one we saw.
Your shit. That stuff is never coming back. That's why people beef with it.
But like that, unless
the inherit you get is Bounce Ukomon.
Yeah, like unless you're playing exactly into Secon, the trashing doesn't matter because like those 3 cards were going to go to the bottom of your deck and you're not going to get there before you won the game anyway. I always thought that was like as a Gal player, I never understood the argument of like, oh no, but it like trashes my pieces. Okay, bro, do you want another Gomamon when you already have combo? No, you don't. You want sure, in the mirror, it can potentially add 2 cards for your hand, so I do get that. But into every other deck, you just have a really, really good ESS.
Yeah, every time I've ever had a cast from a Mirage player and they've resolved pop their boost to basically play a 1-cost search 3 for Gao and Tamer, I'm like, oh god, help me. Because that meant that they're turboing you to death.
But yeah, this is a toolboxy list. The Vikmon's neat. Like,
Pikemon's really cool. This card's starting to pick up, and obviously the first event to take it was the first event to take it was the Blue Flare list in NA. But it's seen some success in in Omnimon controls. It's going forward, expected to do well in those same kinds of decks.
The moment that we're back to a stack format, the card will do a lot better.
It's really good. It's also a free type in case everyone's forgotten. So there's a lot of like random free decks that abuse these things. So congratulations to Philip Decker. Way to go on winning the No Heroes and getting your serial Omni.
And taking it away from a Setcon player.
Yeah.
And remember what we said, this was like a 61-man event, but like those rounds, like you after around like 2-3, you were probably like playing some of the
that's the average top 8.
You were essentially, I'm in a top 8 bracket because the players that were there were like really good players. Like you were in Struggle City probably. This is a funny list. This
Setcon. There are 2 Setcon lists that we're going to look at. I checked out this one when the event finished, and I was really interested in it. And then we're going to talk about the one from LATAM in a minute afterwards. But Setcon is, for all my legitimate grievances with it, it is still an interesting deck building puzzle, proportional to a metagame you expect to play against.
Yeah, you build it.
The problem is the 4-ofs. It has always been the 4-ofs. Purple Kari, SR Magna Angemon, these cards that just see play forever, and Bandai pretends that one rule for he, one not rule for me is a fair way to defend the game.
No,
Hellscythe, well, I think Hellscythe would maybe be okay in a world where it didn't recover 1.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's how it is.
Fine, but it just gets to be a card in a deck that has the best security.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise,
Rev is like problematic for exactly Setcon because
Rev is new, so I think it deserves to be allowed to be problematic for a little while. I don't know why the card from 2020 gets a pass, but that's
it's like the Jogres decks have a good time into Setcon because it's like, security bomb my partition and I go again. The problem is that like when Imperial goes, I'm going to swing my Imperial. I checked Rev. I have jamming, that's fine. Second check, removal option, I'll partition. Except now I have no value from like partitioning and my turn just ends.
So they've come up with something for that. This is an adaptation. I have never seen this in English. So I want to go out on a limb and say that I do a lot of studying for winning lists. And Alejandro Ricondo Barrerio, you are the first person I have seen to successfully steal the Singaporean Thunderflame Crushers. Those dudes were on this shit minute 0 in their format. This card is how Setcon beats partition. Because if you get domed twice by a Paildramon and you go, I have to take this thing off the board, you Thunderflame Crusher, you kill it, and you recover. And there are not enough other cards that out partition 5s and recover you. This is the first thing they've gotten. So this is the adaptation that you would play to beat those kinds of decks. I think it's really smart.
I mean, it's like 6 memory to remove a thing is like pretty efficient, and then like if you're low security, recovering 1 is good. You have the Kyrie as well. You have the Mimi to discount it even more.
Oh, it's also if it's your first one, you can burn too. So if Revelations are in your security, you can trigger the Thunder Flames.
Exactly.
So just nuts. So you Thunder Flame, pop the partition body, and then if you burned yourself down to 3, you can then burn the Rev, gain 2 memory, kill the partition 4s, and then recover 1. It's just so strong.
It's a silly combination to deal. It's like, sure, it's cool that the second players have a 2-card combo that like outs things that have partition. But the deck is still problematic in the sense that it's like, it's not enjoyable to play against. Mm-hmm. It's a deck building oversight.
Yeah.
It's, a pain in the ass because like the deck does, like, a lot of the times Setcon will win because people scoop to it, right?
Yeah.
Like, people will be like, I don't want to play against this, I'm out. Realistically, what you should do is you play the most perfect Digimon you can play game 1, and then you see what happens game 2.
Yeah.
Then you take your sweet time and you try to like navigate game 2, and then like whatever.
The problem
Worst outcome, you lose and it's a draw.
Yeah. The problem is with like Setcon is like you can make mistakes early on that put you so catastrophically behind. With like Loop, it takes a second for the engine to get going, but if you did not kill them by turn whatever and you have to watch the cutscene, like that is on you. Setcon is like I blind game 1, I have no idea what I'm playing, I mulligan a hand that, maybe I didn't need to keep, and I get a different line, like, okay, I can do this. You go first, you search, and they reveal Egg, Kari, Slam, Magna Angemon, and you go, I have already put myself 2 turns behind by adding 2 cards to my hand and going minus. Like,
and it's also like, it's just I get that like fun is subjective, right? Like what I find fun, somebody else might not find fun. But it feels really bad. Like you are, let's say, a casually competitive player, go to your first event, and it's like, lol, I got paired into Secon game 1, and that just destroys your mental. And like, unless you're somebody that's playing with the intention of topping and you've prepared for Secon, like, you know, Secon will get a lot of wins because it'll be like the first few rounds. People will just be like, oh, I played against Secon.
This deck gets a buff from the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Like, if you're a little tired, it's not a good time.
But then it's like Secon will sometimes have there'll be like seasons where like Secon doesn't do well, and I'll be like, well, the few selected, you know, Secon players got paired into people that ended up like topping or winning or whatever, or like just kind of mauled it.
Because Peter won Worlds, it gets to be skillful again.
Yeah, or like, you know, you round one queue into exactly a deck that hates you, like you queue into your red hybrid, you queue the 3v3, the Secon player sat in front of me round 1. I'm just like, okay, cool. Want to see how Seraphimon X is actually a double agent in this matchup? Amazing. Like, that shit happens, but if you're not on a deck that's like, yeah, like you said, your first regional, unless your first regional is, I bought 2 Beelzemon starter decks, you know?
Yeah.
You're in for a bad time.
I do want to say this, while we finish talking about SecCon, because we are going to have to look at another list that's pretty different to this one
the
later.
Cool.
The Mirai is an interesting choice to pick up with the color sources, and this does look a little bit more like an old school Death X control, where like there is no infinite loop in this list. This player is attempting to fatigue the opponent or swing with level 7 15k dudes. It is not trying to do a combo resource loop. So for better or worse, it took this player to second place. It was probably a really interesting. I would like to see where Quad Revelation Death Xmon, like you'll notice when we go over the results that this is the fewest Numemons in Top Cut of the weekend. There were only 2 Numemons in the top 16. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that perhaps a format where there was a lot of good Rapidmon armor vaccines and a Setcon list playing 4 Rev and 3 Death X probably slowed the Numemons down.
It's also like Numemon doesn't have the greatest Setcon matchup. Like a lot of it goes wrong for Numemon into the matchup. Like you win on a very small margin.
Yep. So, once again, kudos to Alejandro. Interesting adaptations to see some stuff finally getting brought into the fold for Setcon. But I think we've talked enough about a deck that goes recovery +1.
Valkova Magna, like old Magna, is a 13, 14k 2-check idiot, probably.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty wild. I can't wait to see the if you like red and yellow Ace Digimon, wait till you see a Funimon in Secon.
You look at this like top 8, right, and all this top 16, and so far it looks like not the most exciting. It's a lot of.
It's very Europe.
Europe.
It's very yellow and Mirage.
It's like the most exciting thing here is like Luga.
Yeah.
We can talk about it. It's the last unique archetype here.
I will say that this event showed us that yellow vaccine is a threat. There was a lot of yellow vaccine in the
it's doing what it was supposed to be doing, which was occupy a good 30 to 40% of your top.
And that's because it's an online event, so it means that in the US, like online events as well, like at your locals, you're going to have like maybe 2 guys that have when I say a lot of money, it's like people that are building yellow vaccine and they have like all the supers and secrets. But at an online tournament, there's going to be like that guy, but in every like region, time
they all show up because they're obsessed.
It's also like one instance, like yellow vaccine is supposed to drop off compared to blue Magna in EX6, and I think that is also another relevant one of people trying to get their last hurrah on the deck before, like if they were a Magnamon player because they like Magnamon, they now are going to actually have to switch to the VMon stuff if they want to keep playing it, or they're just going to play the new yellow hotness, and where they were just trying to see if they could get their top before they,
We'll see. I think best of 3 might change how the format treats Magna X Yellow, but we'll figure it out.
All right.
Let's talk Fenrir, because it's complicated, man. So Fenrir is it's conceptually a more interesting deck building game of an OTK deck than a lot of the other OTK decks we've had in the past. What this version of Fenrir is showing me is that actually all of the cute SOC stuff they could ever print is not really that interesting. Give me my 4 trainings, 3 mem boosts, and 4 analog youths, and my purple pile will get there.
Yeah,
and I don't think there's no judgment on that. I think that's the right option for a format like the one we're in right now. Why would you ever play Castle of the Nine Wolves when you could play Training and Boost? Like, a purple boost can pay for a Crimson Blaze. Like,
it's like the thing with Fenrir is like now technically the deck can fight for board a tiny bit more because of the new solo Garmon. Like
the Dino
pitch
B
to
helps
pop.
a lot too.
Yeah, like pitch to pop a thing, and then like when something dies, evolving to something for free. Like you can play out some of your toolbox. You do have a little bit of toolboxing aspect. Like Tyrannomon becomes a bit more valuable because of exactly Dino B. Dino B having 2 paths it can go. You have the Dino B play Dino B or Dino B play out Uko. Your shell is like still pretty good. There's a couple of things that I personally would not play in Fenrir. Like I think Crimson Blaze and Death X don't need to be there, but this is a list built more in mind for fighting for board and being sort of like more tempo oriented as opposed to like more OTK oriented. Because like the old Solugar, like the BT14 one, is just more efficient.
Yeah.
But the new one,
it does double duty.
Yeah, like it lets you go into an early Fenrir because you're setting up your trash by pitching 2 dark animals.
It is also a really interesting bait card. The interaction with Death X in the mirror or like against it. Like obviously you set up your massive like domain expansion. And it's like, man, if they have Death X, they cook me. And it's like, all right, they Digivolve down, pop everything.
You and then they trigger it.
And then, back to Fenrir, and you go, what?
Exactly. Like this list is definitely built in mind more for like I'm looking at this and this to me does not say OTK Fenrir. To me, this says Tempo Fenrir.
Yeah, for sure.
This is like how Bandai wanted you to play Fenrir.
If you were going to OTK, I think they wanted you to play the SOC cards, but if they were going to OTK someone with Fenrir, people probably played a Delicate Plan.
Yeah, exactly. Like this guy, no fear. He's just like, I'm going to play for board and I'm going to go early, and then if like they do something silly, I just keep playing, whatever.
I'll get fact checked on it. I'm sure I always do. The internet keeps me honest, but I believe this is Fenrir's highest placement in BT16. So Andrew, in Europe, in BT16.
In Europe, yes.
Europe, yeah, probably.
So congratulations, Andrew. It does pay to be a hater.
Yes, sir. I wake up extra early every single day to prey on this deck's downfall.
Right.
That's no heroes, fellas. I'll go ahead and drop. We're gonna zoom through some of these because we're almost out of unique archetypes here. This is, if you again chronologically head over to Chile, where we can have a look at the largest regional of the weekend, the 256 player Hotel Gran Place or Palace in Santiago in Chile, where they played for Serial Omnis. It's pretty sweet. Leviamon won the whole darn thing, so we can talk about that. And LATAM doing its thing. This metagame also consists of Royal Knights, Phoenixmon, another Fenrir, and Imperial. It's pretty wild. So
LATAM, like people, I get the funny jokes. Like people, I get that like people, LATAM and OCE are not real regions, but like at what point do you stop? Do you start taking them seriously? Because these are still people that put time and effort into the event. Like these are people that have practiced and it wasn't a nothing burger event. It's a 256 offline event.
That is a
they hit cap. This is the biggest LATAM regional so far of the year.
It's also an offline event, by the way.
It's one of the biggest offline events of the year. Like SOD just being Chilean, like it's one of the biggest offline events.
So clearly, like people.
Yeah, there are deck varieties here that have not been seen anywhere else in the entire format.
And it's like, is it weird that Levia won? Yeah, it is weird, but
almost. It's almost weird.
Almost. Anyway, we can start going through the list. I do want to
let's talk Levy quickly.
Yeah, I do want to look at the list again as well.
We will also be looking at we're going to look at second place Numemon, and then we're also going to look at 10th place Numemon.
Okay, this is
what the hell is this?
This is a thingy. This is Merva Levy.
Yeah, it is. It's playing 3 Levia X, 2 Merva, 1 Anubis, 3 Leviamon. This is Merva Levia.
Wait, this is base.
This is basically like what Levy was in BT16. We saw this at the Japanese Nationals.
Yeah, this is extremely similar.
Yeah, this is Take Levia. Yeah.
So the adaptation in this that I think is really cool, because we're going to go over a couple of the pieces.
They're playing the 16.
This is they're actually, God bless them, they've done it. Somebody finally realized that you could actually get around needing Protoform every time by just playing Dobermon and Cerberusmon with your X antibody variants.
Yeah.
So now that we have a good Dobermon, you can do that.
Yeah, like the Cerberus and Nova are like good cards. Like,
yeah, so getting the value out of playing them is good enough, and then also getting the value out of having them with their X antibody counterparts also very strong. So we have talked a lot about Anubis Levia over the course of the last couple months. There are only a couple things I really want to highlight here. The Octomon has been ripped out of a pure Leviamon build. I think it's a really interesting adaptation. If you cast yourself back to Salford Regionals, this is an adaptation you can do for decks that kind of hide their little guys for you to deal with. And making people pitch from hand is very strong in this format, in a format where if you look at the rest of the metagame and how it shook up, there was a lot of OTK. There's Royal Knights at 5th, Mirage at 4th, Imperial at 7th, Mirage at 12th. Phoenixmon can OTK you, not necessarily its main thing, and a Fenrir at 14th. So Leviamon having hand ripped via the Octomon is also a very strong effect. So kudos to Damian, I don't want to say that correctly.
It's like we have less to say about Levy because like,
it's established, it does what it does.
This isn't a particularly new take on Levy. This is just like something. It's kind of funny, right? Because
it's
like,
a refreshing take.
Yeah, we saw like, Take Leviamon did well at Japanese Nats, which was BT16. Oh, we can just play this in BT15. Wait, this style of deck isn't suited for BT15, especially with the changing metagame.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go play Intended Levy, and then it's like, okay, now that we're in the format where the list was designed for, we can, you can try it again.
Strengths. So
the dogs also, I would say, like the Cerberus is like being a non-pitch recursion is very cool as a way to make sure that your Mervamons, if you need them, are where they need to be. I think it's a cool little tech. Like obviously it plays into its own engine, but it specifically being able to pick up your one of Anubis and your Mervamon do make the list a little bit more consistent than. I don't think Take was on the dog package.
No, he wasn't.
So I think it's a really cool innovation.
He was playing some of the X antibody stuff, but yeah,
there's enough cards here that I like that I would consider playing this if I didn't dislike Levia with every fiber of my being.
But that's how they do it to you.
Anyway.
Yeah, congratulations. First place to Leviamon, its highest placement of the format.
They're still playing like the protoform and stuff. It's just less of a need for them to have those lines. Like these are, my already good lines are now even better.
Yeah, it's really proactive.
Exactly. They're getting like, Evo into Doberman or on play the Doberman, X Evo it for 0, and then protoform into Cerb X. Like there's a lot of value there.
They definitely get their stuff going on.
Anyway. Let's look at the second place Numemon. It's a little bit more orthodox, but there are a couple particular cards we should highlight. This is playing Purple Matte from the starter deck. Something that
the Hawaiian
pitch one, gain a memory. Yeah, it's a little bit more like what we saw in NA. It's a little bit less like we've seen in some other converting Numemon lists. And in consequence, it's playing fewer Louis. So a kind of departure from some of the things you begin to expect.
Yeah, no Satsuki playing Heavens, one of the security attack minus Garamons. Like this is.
It's not completely unorthodox, but it is a little different from some of the ones that we've seen top.
It's so interesting as well because it looks like it's set up to beat the first place list. Like for Chikurimon, like obviously stops Knights, which was relevant. It helps you keep the Anubismon on the down low. Versus Levia, the on deletion Numemon actually has the most value because all of your on plays get things, so you might as well get value.
You can resolve him under Valkyrion, like floodgating you as well.
Yeah, so like it feels like it's oddly placed to win the mirror, obviously, under the Shrink Wars, but also beat Levia. But this is a second place list that lost to Levia. Or maybe it didn't.
I don't believe this one played Levia. I think Leviamon might have beaten 9th place.
If it was Swift's, then
it's definitely like a cute approach to Nume. Like this is like I'm going to make my deck a bit more wide into the things that I think I'm going to play against. I'm going to abandon some of the traditional routes, and I'm going to play like I'm going to have more outs to just about everything, while also playing Digimon Emperor. Which is the card we're going to see. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of Digimon Emperor, by the way.
Yeah, if you thought they were annoying, now they're going to be the best card.
I like Digimon Emperor.
Let's go over Royal Knights because there's 3 more decks I want to talk about from this event, and then we'll be moving on to our final on Ultimate Cup. Let's talk Royal Knights at 5th. This is Royal Knights' highest placement of the format, I believe, globally, which is cool.
It's okay. Like I think this list is a bit rough around the edges. Like there's definitely things that like
for Emperor do be a way to speed this deck up, and if that's all you needed, welcome back.
It's good exactly into like Nume. Like one of this deck's like main weaknesses is like Rookie Rush or like early poke type stuff that the Digimon Emperors.
Is
one. What was I gonna say? One. Only like one of the Gallon is a bit weird. One Examon. This list is like it's cute. Like they definitely made it work, but like two Leopard is like, oh, what are we doing here? You know, like.
Yeah, I will give you this. The other thing that this deck is kind of an interesting precursor for is that the way Royal Knights is about to change. If you kept up with the Royal Knights, you've watched the show, you know what I've talked about with BT17. Royal Knights gets so good. It gets so good in 17. Marcio's right. Shoto Cosmo goes crazy in EX7, but also stupidly it gets Paladin Mode Ace, and Paladin Mode Ace basically turns the deck from a like I will grind for my OTK to I'll make like 2 to 3 guys, control the board, and then restart. Very powerful cards, very strong effects, and the card that kind of catalyzes this, well, it's 2 cards. It's Ulforce and it's Leopardmon. Leopardmon, to spawn them, you purge for a Leopardmon. Leopardmon produce an Ulforce, and now you're stripping the top 2 cards from one of your opponent's Digimon, either stripping a Monzemon X entirely of all of its pieces, or in some matchups where you don't necessarily have to strip one guy. This gives you options into things like vaccine armor. So this is how you would strip out like a Rapid X and just completely neuter it. So the Ulforce is a really interesting adaptation in that regard. It's a card that people kind of wrote off as one of the bad Royal Knights in some cases. But here it does a lot, and it's going to continue to do a lot. Leopardmon, again, like, people know how good Leopardmon is in this deck. It's not new. But, like, this is one of those scenarios where, like, when the game is about producing things that control the board, Leopardmon gets proportionally better. So
crazy that there's Examon in this as well, because they've leaned heavier on the blue-green.
Yeah, there are just extra pieces of interaction that you are afforded by playing blue and green.
Also, too, Lord Knight is kind of cool because like Lord Knight is typically a card you see like one of.
Yeah,
but this list like plays 2, so it's like it makes it a bit harder for the opponent to play into you and like give yourself like another turn. Like I said, this list is cool, a little bit rough around the edges, but like it clearly worked.
Yeah, I do like the
7 Magnamon is also neat too. This is the most I've seen people play the security one.
That's a good card.
I've seen a lot of 6 Magnas. I've not seen it at 7 before.
Yeah, it's like because once you have Purge plus Omni, you like Purge for this Magna exactly because it's a dupe name and you give it Rush and then you're chilling.
It is really interesting as well that they're on Blaze as their answer for Floodgates. Obviously, Marcus is like the drop it, Mem said kill a Floodgate, but before like BT13, everyone was on the double Paw Cooper as a way to pop one, pop a second one if it shows up. Like Blaze is just another answer. Like
I agree. It's a proactive card for some of your bad matchups, which would be birds. If you are afraid of birds, I would consider a card like Crimson Blaze heavily because birds can do some horrible things.
Crimson Blaze, 4 Digimon Emperor. This is basically like my control tools are good enough at answering boards. What I'm going to do is play cards that stop you from making boards.
I regret not buying my shiny Royal Knights cards when they were cheaper, man. Maybe Magna will get cheap one day. That's my dream.
Imperial.
That's Royal Knights. Let's cover Imperial really quick.
Which version is this?
It's not as crazy. This is not the Wormmon one. We're going to talk about that in the
Maybe that's why I didn't win.
But this is a Hammerspark Digimon Emperor Imperial pile, which I think is cool.
It's fine.
There's no blue cards here for your EU Digimon Andes, but there's a lot of I would say kind of standard stuff here. One thing that is in this list that I've not seen a ton of this format is Lydramon. I was kind of under the impression for some of the Imperial players that Lydramon has fallen off a little bit.
It depends. It's fine. Good. It's like the utility is like, oh, I can use this to control an extra body early, and like you can make it cost 1 with the reduction Vmon.
Yeah.
I don't hate it, but if you're not playing the Wormmon that evolves from trash, the ability to like pivot into whatever color you're missing from the trash, I feel like, it's a bit less consistent. But, again, this is like another list that's like, is it the most creative Imperial list? No, not really. Like, it looks pretty standard to me, other than like they adapted the Digimon Emperor as like their... Instead of removal, I'm going to play like tax cards. Like I'm going to slow down the Numemons, right? Like Imperial has a pretty awful Nume matchup, so why not just play a card that like makes it a bit easier?
It is a shame this card is so before its time. Rule text treated as Ken.
Oh, the card would go insane.
Oh my god, no! Imperial needs no new help. I'm not going to pretend.
But yeah, like it's Imperial. Like we've seen more exciting lists. Like this is still a cool list. Big up
unlike the EU winning list, this is the DP Demi Vmon. That's the only other thing I'd like to highlight.
A bit lower on the Stingmons, by the way. This is like 5 Stingmons. I guess they do have 2 Lydra, but still. But 5, and then 2. I mean, math checks out, I suppose. But moving on.
Imperial. I want to talk Tyrant. This is my favorite Tyrant list I've seen top this far.
I haven't seen this.
It's got Galemon in it. This is the first topping Liberator card I've ever seen.
Sure. So if you want my 2 cents, Galemon's cool because it gives you when evolving DP until end of opponent's turn.
Yeah.
You need Shoto for piercing, or do you need a tamer?
You need Shoto specifically.
So okay, so you don't get to.
It doesn't offer you that, but it is 2k DP inherit, which is
you do get you do get your turn plus 2k, so it does functionally a lot of the same things that the Kuwaga does, just with the addition of like you have more copies of Blade Kuwaga. So that's neat. It is playing the Stigmon Akua package, which I do like a lot. It's playing the Pomamons, which I like a lot. 3 Tento is a bit weird. If I had to guess, it might be because of budget, because there's no reason for you not to play 4. Like, to me, it's like the rookie lineup looks fine, and like, you know, they're playing one more Lopmon than one of the Tentomons. You know, usually it's a 4-2 split, but they're going 3-3. And like, the argument can't be that good for you to be playing the extra Lopmon, because the Lopmon, you need to be in a winning position for the card to like do well, whereas like the Tento is just always good. Yeah. But you know, Akua Sting package I like, you know, very fast. How many Shivas?
One. It was
Shiva's
just a card. There's also a Death X in here, which is notable because with Kua you can put it over the Grand.
If you scroll down, I want to see the delays in the Digimon Emperors.
It's pretty standard.
2 4s fine, 2 Emperors fine. Yeah, so like they chose to just play less 6s in favor of having room for more stuff, but then having like a big blowout with Death X. You'd be surprised the amount of cards that a Tyrant can actually go through, especially once you get like your Digimon Emperor, because you're constantly evolving. You do cycle through your deck a decent amount, but yeah, this is definitely playing a lot of the good cards. Cool that they're playing the Gale. The Gale is like super cool. I'll give them that. I don't know if it's
the first time I've ever seen it top. I'm really excited.
But yeah, how many 5s? 8 5s. Yeah, this is fine.
It's 12.
8 5s. 6 5s. 6
5s actually.
They chose not to play the Kabuterimon, which is a bit.
No, it is 8 5s. The Okuamon is being treated.
Yeah.
It's being counted separately. That's weird. Yeah, the tracker must be broken. Hey, folks at Digital Gate, if you see that, your deck builder's broken. I got a bug report for you.
The only thing is that like the Galemon takes away from you being able to play the Kabuterimon, which I think is like kind of important, as you having a very sticky level 4 that does threaten the ace at all times. But that's just like, you know, they were playing for a much better pop-off turn, right? Like more consistent.
I think this being another way to suspend a different Digimon is also a cool thing. So
yeah, it's very neat. It's very neat.
It's also your opponent's Digimon. It can suspend anything.
Yeah, it's a super neat card. Like, again, and this is what I'll say: Tyrant doesn't need to be all bugs for the deck to do well. Like, you just need to figure out what cards you can slot in that, you know, matter. Like, sure, either Searcher's gonna whiff sometimes. Yeah, but Kokabu is also a top 4. So the chances of you not revealing a bug are extremely low, and your delay cards all pick up your tech slots anyway, so.
Yeah. I've seen a lot more non-bug stuff in lists with more double Typhoons, so I'm glad to see this one worked out.
Yeah.
So that's Tyrant 8th. I said we'd look at SetCon really quick. I want to, just for a second, because we can talk about it. This is the closest I've seen... sorry, that was Bugs at 9th. SetCon is at 8th. This is the closest I've seen to Red SetCon in a little while. It is a lower emphasis on things like the Revelations and Karis. It's playing still for the Security Purple Kari. But this, unlike the previous variant, like we talked about, is the Avenged Kidmon Lament package. So it's going infinite. It's got 5 eggs, not just 4, because it's trying to grind value. And it's on the Salamon, unlike just not playing rookies. So a lot of pieces here that do a different kind of array. I want to highlight the Psychomon. I want to know what happens in your SetCon format deck building, where you're like, I got to play around those gosh darn Royal Knights and Death X's.
I mean, it's a medical, and it was relevant.
Peter was playing it right. Like, it's fine. Like,
yeah.
It is a purple source.
Yeah, there are 3 Valk Aces, 2 Seraphimons, 1 Gallon, 1 Avenged Kid as your 6s. This is a lot more of an offensive array of 6s for SetCon. Now, you could kind of clearly understand this to mean that this is a lot of how the deck is pushing its damage.
Oh my goodness.
What is the security inherit on the Anjou?
It's if you have a purple Digimon, the Psychmon is there as a Sec +1 inherit, so your Valk can swing for 3.
I mean, and your Death Xmon. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, but it's another purple Digimon that enables.
Target.
That is really funny.
It's a Flame Hellscythe target.
Yes, it is a flame. You know what? You're right. It's the Flame Hellscythe target to turn on your security inheritable.
Yeah, like it's cool. Sure.
Yeah, because if you sec -2 someone and they're like, oh, I still need my draw, I'm gonna swing, or you're gonna swing with the other body, and then the ace shows up, and then suddenly it's like, huh?
Oh yeah, three
cost lightning joust.
It's fine. Yeah. Cool list. Like, sure.
Yeah, it's a slightly different variant. We've talked about it a couple times, but yeah, there you go. That's Red SetCon. Happy to see it in a different kind of light. The last list I want to look at here from this event is the 10th place Numemon. It's the only purple Numemon here from the weekend. I've not seen one in a little bit. I'm pretty much...
Yeah, since BT16 came out, basically everyone jumped ship.
There are occasionally ones in NA, I believe, but like I don't think I've seen one from any LATAM.
The only thing that I'll say about purple Nume is like, you're a bit faster, but you make your deck worse into everything else because you don't have the ability to play floodgates and you don't have the ability to pivot evoing in the back.
Yeah, this is an Ed of Elk list. It's on the Ruin mode. It's playing double Emperor to slow people down in the mirror, and then the fun sauce is a DG Dimension for good measure.
Hell yeah, downgrade.
Yeah, very funny. I'm kind of into it.
It's a good card.
I just wanted to highlight the specifics of the... we've talked about this on the show, and Andrew's talked about it on videos, but gang, there's a Tapirmon here instead of a Candlemon, and in case you've forgotten that you can do that and don't have to play Candlemon, this is a reminder. Let's go ahead and move on to the final event from the weekend. This is the Ultimate Cup hosted by LATAM TCG. 92 players, still pretty big. We're back to Numemon taking pretty much...
There was a Phoenix Mon list before, and there's a Phoenix Mon list here.
There is, yes. So this was the second Phoenix Mon representation.
So I guess we're going to look at like Red Hybrid Phoenix.
Yeah, Red Hybrid is here. We're going to look at the top two. Red Hybrid is here, but the fourth place Imperial is the one that everybody's been talking about. So we'll talk about that maybe first. Behold, gentlemen, this is Ken's Imperial Dramon. I've never seen it convert. No, scroll down. There's a Minomon here too.
Ooh. When this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon, if this has two more colors, gain one. Interesting.
It's fine. Fights for board a bit, gets you a bit of extension, doesn't make you
sounds
rely.
Like it fights for board a lot.
Yeah,
it just makes you less reliant on like Hammer Spark for you to get your memory, because typically you're swinging with piercing into things anyway. Yeah. So it's just adding a little bit more ward. The downside is that like theoretically you can't play like boosts or trainings.
So
because you're on the green base.
Yeah, this deck is instead playing it gets to evolve its Wormmons for nothing. So the 16 Wormmon that pops off on the full send is way easier to use here.
Yes, the purple Wormmon is so much better here.
Yeah, and the Togemogumon is still a crazy tech from Magnamon because you can strip out the armor source from the Magnamon X and just kind of
very good card.
And being able to do that over Wormmon for 2 is very strong. And then if you hadn't already known, the XVmon is still really good even in this deck. So
it's also playing 1 Magna X because you're playing 4 of the Togemogumon.
It's playing 2 Magna X.
Sorry, 2 Magna X.
Yeah, so it is a like DNA with your Pyldramon and then full send it. So it's very interesting. I'm a big fan of the idea that like should they ever clear the Magna X, you just go back down to the 5 and then partition the armor back out too.
Yeah.
Well, partition is interrupted, so you can partition no matter what, right? Like even if they try to target the Magna, you just partition anyway.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cool stuff. Interesting things. I don't think you necessarily want to give your armor form source away if you're using the Magnamon stack, but I get what you mean.
Yeah, it's fine.
That's cool.
Well, I mean, theoretically, if you were going to somehow purge down, say you're playing into deletion, you could just go into another Magna, or you can just, choose not to go into it. You can, rebuild into Imperial if you've given up your Magna sources. I think is interesting. Either way, still very cool.
Yeah, I'm into it. It's also it's the first time I've seen the Minomon top, so I just wanted to make a specific point of mentioning. So congratulations to Julio Salas. Well done. Well, let's look really quick at the Numemon first place list. It's kind of like a lot of the other ones we've already seen. This one's at least playing more of the Edamons. But like I said, we're just going to go over first and second for each of the events, just so people have had a chance to see them, because I know we get comments if we didn't. It's largely white bread Numemon. In terms of like the spice, I would say there are a lower count of the floodgates here, and just a lot more like accessible engine. And then this is also like some of the black Numemon lists we've seen this week have started cutting the Southkeys. This one's got them back. So congratulations. Nothing takes away from a first place at a Ultimate Cup. Enjoy your Susanomon. Second place is the second purple base of the weekend. It's on Gabu X as well, which I think is a cool adaptation. But the thing I thought was really fun is this is the first time I've seen somebody playing Rapid X in a purple Numemon. Protoform getting its value here, of course. You protoform into the 5s, you protoform into the 6. So a lot of good stuff. Specifically in terms of any other tech stuff, there's more Warumonzes that I've seen in a purple list in a little while. But it's cool. I like to see that the Gabumon X finding Rapidmon X is still like a legit synergy piece. I sort of wondered if there was like, obviously just playing Floodgate rookies is very powerful in Numemon right now. They don't really need the Agumons. But like part of me was like, why does the black base not play Agu X to find Rapid X? It's probably slower and it won't matter in most cases, but it saw a little bit of success. I believe it was Slicks. He is a Singaporean player, I believe. So guy got it was green Numemon with the what's it called? Quartz. So stuff like that. We've had some precedents. So it's cool to see it do well. Congratulations on second place. Let's talk Red Hybrid. It's here twice. It's the first time I've seen it. There are Valk aces in here, which is
kind of makes sense. Realistically, if your Garuda is kind of weird because it's decent, but that means that it's only really good in the early game, and then for you to Valk someone, it's okay, what are you Valking on? And it's okay, it's probably the Garuda, and then you have an overflow 7 on the board.
I've seen people tell you that one of the things you do with this is that you drop the Garuda for 4 to bluff a Blast Evolve and play the Mem Setter.
Yeah, so and then it's Valk again.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got options. I think it's an interesting synergy.
It's cool, but you can. There's something that you can do with this, which is you can go into an Alda for you spend your 3 memory to go into your Alda, and then you can some number of Graph Crush to make sure that your Valk keeps turn, and then you Crimson Blaze someone, and then you're Crimson Blazing for 11.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of neat. I'll give them that. But this isn't playing any of the cards that I think you'd want to play in a red hybrid list to make it succeed in.
There's more
Ukos, sure.
There's also a more orthodox red hybrid list that we can have a look at in a minute. But
this is fine. A bit low on the level 4s, but in as a result, they have the Ukomon for the speed, and the new Ukomon is how bad is.
About could anything,
top 3 for Takuya every single turn is, right?
Yep.
Realistically, that's the Ukomon that you're not swinging with because it's going to give you value every single turn.
Exactly. Kudos to Joel. Well done. And we're going on. We got Birds to look at, Marcy, if you want, and then I think we can wrap it up with the 16th place red hybrid.
Okay, Birds, finally.
This is a different Birds build. It's not quite as balls to the walls as the one we saw, but this is...
Scroll down.
This is on Akiho's and Christie's.
Oh, no. This is... Keep scrolling. Yeah, this is basically a variation of the Spanish list.
Yeah, instead of the 9999.
No, that was the German list, right?
Yeah.
But this is basically a variation on the Spanish list.
From the Barcelona one, yeah.
Yeah, we all have decided that Akiho is worth playing. 10 rookies is nice. They decided to play the Akilamon over the Saberdramons, which could be for... As well. Yeah, Kirsty package. Akilamon over Saber could be for a few reasons. It could be because either they just didn't have access to the Saberdrers, but Aquila is good on its own. Akilamon is pretty good. Sure, it's not searchable off of exactly BT11 BU and Akiho, but you're only playing 2 Akiho anyway, and typically your BT10 BU is fine to also Evo in the back. It is playing a lot of delays, and this is probably because there's a bigger emphasis on making a first, you raise your first stack and you cheat, right? This version is okay, if I go second and the opponent passes me, God forbid my opponent passed me 2 memory, I can always Evo for 4, training, and do something else. Typically Evo for 4, or play a boost, and then if they have the X antibody, that's Phoenix X on turn 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's playing the Valk, which is great. I tried last weekend 2 Valk, and it was decent. The Tamer lineup, also notice that they decided to forego the Crimson Blaze because we just collectively decided that Crimson Blaze just wasn't worth playing in Birds. And the reason is that you'd want Crimson Blaze to deal with little stray bodies, but the Akilamon does that.
Yep.
The on-play Akilamon just does that. So if you have...
And the Garudamon inherit too.
Yeah, and the Garudamon inherit. If you have Akillamon to play off a Phoenixmon, you can like pop something with the same DP as Aquila, and then Aquila on play pop a 3k. So you're deleting a 5k, a 3k, and then in like a 6, and that's like 3 bodies. And you also popped an 8k with Garuda X.
Yeah.
The only thing that I have to say about this list is like, realistically speaking, they could probably play like more level 4s. I feel like this is what, 7
4s, yeah. 3 Bergermon, 2 Aquila, 2 Berger.
7 is rough. Like, they do have the ability to get to them, but I like 8. It's a bit more comfortable for me.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to a playstyle thing, because Trix is on 6 on his list, because like, especially if you're leaning hard into Christie and like cheating out the 5s, like the 4s are just nice to haves rather than like a mandatory part of your like line building, which I think is really interesting. I
also know this is like a variation of Spanish build, because like down to the 1BT11 Garuda, they're also playing like the 3-2-2 Tamer split. They just kind of like trimmed a lot of like the cards that we thought were necessary for Bird. They were just like, no, we're just focused on the good stuff. I will say that like I said, they could go realistically down to like 2 of each delay. Like 4 delays is like kind of the sweet spot for me.
Yeah. I get worried about less Wings of Love.
Yeah, like an extra copy of Wings goes a long way.
Do you also play a removal option for Tyrant, or are you just hoping you just don't see them?
The Tyrant matchup is like...
It's not as bad as you'd think, because if the Tyrant's stopping you, it's popping you, and then you're getting your value separately. Yeah, it's not great, but like Tyrant isn't the hard counter that you'd think it is.
Right. Yeah, like realistically, Tyrant is like, you're generally pretty fast, and if they have to spend time finding pieces, like you're putting a lot of pressure on them. Also, they kill you relatively slow, so the idea is like you find openings in their defense, like if they don't have anything, okay, you go, okay, I'm gonna mark you for like 3 checks. And then you oh, there we go. Hold on. I'm just gonna... My Discord was going off kind of crazy, so I'm just gonna deafen myself. Versus Tyrant, the game plan is to basically like you find an opening, you mark them for like 3 checks, and then you build up. You gauge how much time do you have before you die. You don't care if you go to 0 security, as long as you're not dead. You're building for the biggest possible like loop of resources, because unless they present you like 3 Izzy's, Meta Life, some Aces, and like a bunch of other stuff, you can push through like the bare minimum defense. You just have more swings.
Fair enough.
Right. But yeah, Bird's phenomenal deck. Like, I love this deck so much, man. Like, I'm glad I put in the reps to like practice the deck and learn it, because it's just such an enjoyable deck.
I think we'll wrap up with Red Hybrid at 16th. There are other things obviously here to talk about, but if you guys are interested, you should check out digitalgateopen.com to read the profiles and stuff. We use a lot of Eggman events here, but it's nice to represent people. Yeah, it would be cool to get sponsored, huh?
Yeah, check them out. I somehow doubt that one will happen.
Look, just because I found the deck builder was broken. Anyway, Red Hybrid here, this is relatively closer to a standard Red Hybrid brew with 2 exceptions. There are Magma Bombs and there are Valkyrie Aces. So I want to go over that really quick.
Valkyrie Ace is like weird to me, because like...
I never see anyone end on Aldemon. I don't know who you're...
No, you shouldn't end on Aldemon. Like, what scenario are you ending on Aldemon for?
Yeah.
Magma Bomb is kind of cool, like...
I mean, sometimes they do swing with Aldermon if they don't have like the thing that's like, I'm gonna be there's like, I mean, Aldermon sometimes is like 14k, and it's like if you're just chipping for 1,
is his number.
If you're chipping for 1, so you can just go like Emperor Atomic next turn and hit them for 4 checks with Omni. Like
typically, the way that you go about like Aldemon is like, okay, you go, I'll swing with Alda. To, let's say you're like you have 3 memory, right? Like this is like the Red Hybrid flowchart. You go Evo for 2, Evo for 1. You're now at 0. Swing with Aldemon, gain 2 back. Evo into Emperor for 3, choke at 1, pop something, right? Like you do the same thing with Valk, and you're doing this if you want to clear like a thing to just completely remove tempo. And you go into Valk, and instead of popping, whatever you want to pop, you're basically popping a 5k. But on the next turn, your Valk is swinging for 3 checks, and it is like a big Valk, like Takuya plus BT10 Burning Greymon, that's like at least like a 1.
It doesn't get the DP from the BT10. It only gets its DP from Takuya.
Yeah, Takuya.
It would also keep the Aldamon's DP if you manage to evolve all the way up on the same turn, which
Sure,
again, like
yeah.
by popping the small blockers is sometimes relevant in the format. There are occasionally 5k blockers, not a ton.
It's a cool list. It's also like a 5k option, right? Like, sorry, a 5 play cost option if you have a tamer.
Yeah,
so.
Magma Bomb always costs 5 in this deck.
So, yeah, it's cute.
Which means Magma Bomb costs 3 with a Graph Crush, which is just super powerful if you need to set that up. Yeah.
Also, no BT16 Uka, which is kind of interesting.
It's all gas, baby. We just swing the rookie.
Oh, this is like 12 rookies, but only 8 Flaybons. But then they did commit to the 12 level
4s,
which I like a lot. Very nice. This is why we like LATAM.
Yes, good LATAM. Peak Digimon. Peak Digimon comes from, well, Chile and the surrounding area, apparently. But yeah, fellas, thanks for wrapping that up. That was a good job. We did a clean 2 hours on 4 events there. That was nice.
Yeah.
We did what Risu the Squirrel could never.
Well,
I'm joking. I like
shout outs to Risu.
Shout outs to Risu. I like his videos.
Yeah, shout outs to Risu.
A lot of shout outs in this pre-recorded segment.
Yeah, true. He supplied me with Lethal Living footage. We didn't play Lethal Living because obviously it's pre-recorded. If you want to see more clips rather than me holding these two people in the craziest hostage situation you've ever seen, please send me clips. It'll also be in the pinned comment right under the winner case that if you're in the UK, you should definitely attend. It's going to be at the tail end of July. And
shout outs to Conquest Collectibles. If you don't know Mini Kill, you should, because you're going to hear more about his products.
Playing in my head right now.
Yeah, it's a banger.
I can't wait to force Saf to make one of those.
My guy Jamie did a really fun time. I said we'd talk about it on the next pod, but obviously we got stuff going on right now, and I think Jamie knew that we had stuff going on right now. We got freaking Wake Up. If you're in the area, go to Wake Up on Trent, by the way. Andrew puts a lot of work into the scene, so it's nice to see it do well. But Jamie, the homie, Mr. Conquest Collectibles himself, has been tracking the results of Lethal Living. And I just want to reiterate before the allegations get made that I am a total fraud. Sometimes you got to throw for content. There you go. Anyway,
if I don't look at the doc, I don't know who's winning. So I haven't opened it yet, and I'm thinking about
actually, it's embarrassing, Marcio. We're both losing to chat.
Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to live in ignorance.
See, the funny thing about chat as well is he had the option as to, I was like, well, sometimes the hosts bet, and then there's like, so do I include chat? I'm like, yeah, they're paying for it. They're not getting those points back if they lose. So
that's because when me and Marcio have to throw for content, we at least make some channel points off.
Yeah, so sometimes you guys are also influencing chat, so you're dragging them down with you. If you're really confident in your vote, you're making.
We are straight up insider trading on Lethal Living.
It is very, very funny. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining us for this offline podcast. We'll do it as a premiere, so you guys can still live chat. We will probably see them. I'll obviously be at Wake Up, so tune into that. It'll either be on my Twitch. There'll be shit there'll be a lot of, it's going to be a beefy pinned comment, but most importantly, we do have the winner case. It'd be very, very cool if you all could show up. We don't have the location locked in yet, but we're looking at basically like last week of July. So hopefully you'll be seeing all of that streamed from there. Digimon is very cool this year, and we're going to keep trying to put on more shit. If this does well, we can do more.
Yeah, it is tentatively titled, pending approval on Limitless, Misplay for Game Invitational Tournament Series #1. So, that means there could be 2.
Yeah, and thanks to venue complications, #2 can be bigger. Like, we did 40 because that's what our original planned venue was looking at.
And what money we had at the moment.
Yeah, if this does well enough that it's self-sufficient and you guys like playing Digimon with cool-ass prizing that's not just your regional pack and your EPs, then amazing. We got something cool cooked up for you. We'll be back live next week, I think, and then there'll be another week that we might have to do a pre-recorded. Let us know what you think of the pre-recorded ones, by the way. Like, they're different. We just did the tier list, which was done fantastically, as always, episode 18.5.
Peak bait, baby.
Yes,
we're so bad.
It's brilliant.
Views.
We literally put it out on release day.
Yeah, we did well with that one. We might continue to do release day ones, but also shout out to everyone on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I've been keeping track of the engagement. It's like 80% by like 2 hours in. Like, you guys actually fully engage with the podcast, and we appreciate all of you. So rate us 5 stars or like or whatever the garbage is. Boost the subscribers on YouTube to 3K so you can get that Discord that I don't want to make but y'all want. And this is my full-time job. I say it in nearly every video now. Your boy is always unemployed. So if you got some spare change, appreciate joining the members. You get ad-free content, and you might. After the first winner box, there is a new project that we're working on, and that will take significant portions of my time. More so than the video essays did. So consider supporting that. You'll get to see what they are early. All that good stuff. Yeah.
Think of your 4 least favorite Digimon and put them in the comments below. Your 4 least favorite, chat.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us. There's no Boko this week. We'll get more of them done when we're doing live shit. But,
okay, bye.
Bye.
Baba booey, baba booey, baba booey.
Baba booey.